Story 1. The Girl in the Quarry. I haven't touched my mountain bike in 3 weeks, and to be honest, I'm seriously considering selling it on Craigslist just so I never have to look at the tires again. I know that sounds dramatic, but if you saw what I saw out in the shadowed hollers behind my property, you'd lock your doors and never leave the house again. I live in eastern Kentucky, right on the edge of where the suburbs bleed into the real, deep wilderness. It's beautiful country, dense forests, rolling hills, and plenty of isolation. About 6 months ago, I found this perfect trail system that cuts through the woods behind my subdivision. One of the trails dead ends at a massive chain-link fence topped with razor wire. Beyond that fence is what the locals call the sump. It used to be a limestone quarry decades ago, until they hit an aquifer and it flooded. Now it's just this deep, stagnant body of black water surrounded by steep rock walls. Here's the thing that always bugged me. The sump isn't on Google Earth. If you pull up the satellite view, that specific patch of land is pixelated, or just shows generic tree cover where the water should be. There are U.S. government property and biohazard signs every 50 feet, which makes 0 sense for an old rock quarry. I usually ride that trail loop in the evenings to unwind after work. It's a grueling 5-mile ride, mostly uphill, with a nice coast back down past the quarry fence. The incident started 2 weeks ago. It was late, maybe 8 p.m., and the sun was already dipping below the ridge. As I was pedaling past the fence line, I heard this wet, slapping sound, like someone hitting a wet towel against a rock. I stopped and scanned the woods, but the tree line was dead silent. I brushed it off as a deer or a coyote and finished my ride. That night, a massive summer storm rolled in. I'm talking window-rattling thunder and rain coming down so hard it looked like white sheets. I was in the living room, watching TV, when I heard it. It wasn't the thunder. It was a voice. A faint, high-pitched whimpering coming from the backyard. Now, my house backs right up to the tree line. I paused the TV and listened. Through the drumming of the rain, I heard a girl's voice, clear as a bell, right outside my sliding glass door. "Please, let me in. It's so cold." My stomach dropped. It sounded like a teenager. My first instinct wasn't fear, it was concern. I thought maybe a neighbor's kid had gotten lost in the storm. I rushed to the back door and flipped on the porch light. What I saw froze the blood in my veins. Standing on my patio, soaking wet, was a young woman. She was wearing a dirty, pale yellow sundress that looked about 20 years out of style. She wasn't shivering. She was crouching, her spine bent at a weird, unnatural angle, pressing her forehead against the glass. I unlocked the latch, cracking the door just an inch to yell out to her. "Miss? Are you okay?" The second the lock clicked, she snapped her head up. Her eyes were wide, too wide, and completely vacant. Then she launched herself at the door. I slammed it shut and locked it a split second before she collided with the glass. She didn't hit it like a person wanting shelter. She hit it like a battering ram. She let out this guttural shriek that sounded more like a bobcat than a human. Then, just as quickly as she attacked, she stopped. She stared at me through the glass for a heartbeat, tilted her head, and bolted. And I mean bolted. She sprinted on all fours, hands and feet hitting the mud, scrambling off my patio and into the dark woods with a speed that was physically impossible for a human being. I called 911 immediately. The sheriff came out, shone some flashlights around, saw the muddy prints on my patio, and basically told me it was probably a meth head looking to rob the place. They didn't find anyone. I didn't sleep for 2 days. But human beings are good at rationalizing things. By the time the weekend rolled around, I had convinced myself the cops were right. Just a junkie. Scary, but human. So, last Tuesday, I decided to reclaim my routine. I took the bike out for an afternoon ride. It was bright and sunny, the safest time possible. I was looping back around, coming up on the quarry fence, when I saw movement. I squeezed my brakes, skidding to a halt. I looked through the heavy-gauge chain-link fence down toward the black water of the sump. She was there, the same woman in the yellow dress. She was standing on a narrow ledge of rock way down inside the quarry, right at the water's edge. My heart was hammering against my ribs. That fence is 12 feet high, topped with razor wire, and buried a foot into the ground. There are no holes, I've checked. There is physically no way to get inside that perimeter without heavy industrial equipment. She was facing away from me, staring at the water. I must have gasped or crunched some gravel because she slowly rotated her torso around to face me. She didn't look angry this time. She looked amused. She raised a pale hand and gave me a slow, rigid wave. Then she smiled. It was a smile that stretched too wide, showing too many teeth. "I'm calling the police!" I shouted, my voice cracking. Her smile widened. Without breaking eye contact, she took a step backward. She stepped right off the ledge and fell backward into the black water. She didn't splash. She hardly made a ripple. She just slipped under the surface like a heavy stone. I panicked. I called the cops again, waited by the fence. When they arrived, they searched the perimeter. They found nothing. No breach in the fence, no signs of a body in the water. They looked at me like I was the crazy one. But here's the kicker, and the reason I'm writing this. Since that day, the meth head explanation doesn't work anymore. Because last night, I heard the scratching on my window again, and this morning, I found wet, muddy handprints on the inside of my locked garage door. I don't know what lives in that quarry. I don't know why the government keeps it off the maps. But I know one thing for sure. It knows where I live, and it's getting closer. Story 2. The Dead Stretch of Route 93. If you've ever driven through the high desert of Nevada at 3 a.m, you know exactly what absolute darkness looks like. There's no light pollution, no houses, just endless scrub brush and a sky so big it makes you feel like you're being watched by the stars. I'm a long-haul trucker by trade, but this happened when I was just driving my pickup back from a family reunion in Phoenix. I was with my cousin Marcus. We're close, grew up together, but Marcus has a bladder the size of a walnut. We were on a particularly desolate stretch of Route 93. It was about 2:30 a.m. I was blasting classic rock to stay awake, and Marcus had been asleep against the passenger window for hours. Suddenly, he jerked awake and begged me to pull over. He said it was an emergency. I groaned, but slowed down. There was no shoulder, really, just a patch of gravel before the ground turned into soft sand and sagebrush. I killed the engine to save gas, but left the headlights on, cutting a twin beam through the dusty air. Marcus stumbled out, mumbling an apology, and walked past the headlights into the pitch black to do his business. I sat there in the silence. It's weird how quiet the desert gets. It's not peaceful. It's heavy. I was scrolling through my phone, trying to find a signal, when I heard the passenger door wrench open. Marcus practically dived into the seat. He was pale, like sheet-white pale, and he locked the door immediately. "Go," he whispered. Just drive, man. What? Did you see a coyote or something? I laughed, reaching for the ignition. It wasn't a coyote. I think I saw you. I stopped fast. What are you talking about? Marcus was shaking. He told me that while he was standing out there, about 30 yards deep in the brush, he saw a silhouette standing to his left. He thought I had gotten out to stretch my legs. He said he waved at it, and the figure waved back. But then, the figure took a step toward him, and the movement was wrong. It was jerky, too liquid. And that's when he realized I was still in the truck, because he could hear the radio. I got a cold chill down my spine, the kind that makes the hair on your arms stand up. I didn't ask any more questions. I turned the key. We rolled forward maybe 50 feet before the steering wheel violently jerked to the left. The truck shuddered, and that unmistakable thwap, thwap, thwap of a blown tire filled the cab. "No way," I muttered. "You have got to be kidding me." I didn't want to stop. Every instinct in my body screamed, "Keep driving on the rim." But we were miles from civilization, and ruining the axle would strand us for good. I grabbed my heavy-duty flashlight and a tire iron from under the seat. "Stay in the car, lock the doors," I told Marcus. I jumped out. I went straight to the rear driver's side tire. It wasn't just flat. It was shredded. And sticking out of the sidewall wasn't a nail or a sharp rock. It was a piece of sharpened rebar, wrapped in duct tape at one end like a homemade shiv. Someone had wedged it into the gravel perfectly so that I'd run over it the second I started moving. This wasn't an accident. We were being hunted. My hands were shaking so bad I dropped the lug nut wrench twice. I was working on pure adrenaline, my eyes darting between the tire and the wall of darkness beyond the road. I had the spare halfway on when a sound cut through the night air. It was a baby crying. It was distinct, loud, and coming from the darkness directly across the road. Now, logic tells you that there is no reason for a baby to be in the Nevada desert at 3 a.m. But your heart hears that sound and wants to help. Marcus rolled down the window a crack.
"Do you hear that? Someone's out there. We have to help."
"No, we don't," I hissed, tightening the last bolt with everything I had. "Dude, it's a baby," Marcus yelled, actually reaching for the door handle. "Don't you open that door," I screamed at him. "Think, Marcus. Where is the car?" "Where are the parents? Why did it only start crying when we stopped?" As if on cue, the crying stopped abruptly. It didn't fade out. It cut off, like someone hitting a pause button. Then, a new sound replaced it. A laugh. A dry, rasping, wheezing laugh that sounded like two pieces of sandpaper rubbing together. I threw the jack in the truck bed, didn't even bother with the flat tire, and jumped into the driver's seat. I peeled out of there, kicking up a cloud of dust and gravel. As the headlights swept across the brush on the side of the road, I saw them. Two figures. They were standing just at the edge of the light. They weren't wearing desert gear. They were wearing dark hoodies. And they were just standing there, watching us leave. They didn't chase us. They didn't need to. They knew they had missed their window. We didn't speak for the next 100 miles. I reported it to the highway patrol at the next town. The officer took my statement, looked at the piece of rebar I'd pulled from the tire, and just sighed. He told me they call them ghost stops. People set up traps on lonely stretches of highway, waiting for good Samaritans or unlucky drivers. But here is the part that keeps me up at night. The officer told me they found a campsite near where we broke down a few days later. They found some clothes some trash, and a battery-operated tape recorder. Marcus thinks we escaped a robbery. But sometimes, when it's quiet, I remember that wheezing laugh.
I don't think they wanted my wallet.
I think they wanted to play. And I think about who might have stopped if I hadn't.
Story 3. The Ranger in the Snow.
I've worked as a professional house sitter for about 4 years now. It's usually a sweet gig. I get paid to stay in mansions, eat rich people's food, and watch their expensive dogs. But after what happened last winter outside of Aspen, Colorado, I've officially retired. I'm done. The house was this architectural marvel, made almost entirely of glass and steel, sitting on a ridge about 10 miles from the nearest town. It was beautiful during the day, but at night, those floor-to-ceiling windows turned the place into a fishbowl. You couldn't see anything out in the dark, but everything out there could see you perfectly.
It was my 3rd night there. The owners were in Europe, so it was just me and their golden retriever, Barnaby. A heavy snowstorm had rolled in that afternoon, and by 10 p.m., the world outside was just a swirling wall of white. I was in the kitchen making tea when Barnaby stood up. He walked over to the massive glass sliding door that led to the back deck and let out this low, vibrating growl. Barnaby was a lover, not a fighter. He usually greeted burglars with a wagging tail, so this behavior was weird. I walked over to see what he was looking at. I cupped my hands against the glass, squinting into the blizzard. At first, I didn't see anything. Then the motion sensor floodlights flickered on. Standing at the very edge of the light, right where the deck met the forest, was a man. He was wearing a park ranger uniform, the khaki shirt, the green pants, even the wide-brimmed hat. He was standing perfectly still, letting the snow pile up on his shoulders. My first thought was relief. I figured maybe his truck had broken down in the storm, and he needed a phone. I unlocked the latch and slid the door open just a crack, keeping the chain lock on. The wind howled into the living room, instantly freezing. "Can I help you?" I yelled over the wind. The ranger didn't step forward. He didn't even look cold, despite not wearing a coat. He just smiled. It was a practiced, stiff smile, like he was posing for a photo. "Ma'am," he shouted back. His voice was weirdly loud, booming over the storm without any strain. "We have reports of a gas leak in this sector. I need you to evacuate the premises. Please come with me to my vehicle." Panic flared in my chest. A gas leak? I started to reach for my coat on the rack near the door. "Come now," he said. "It is not safe. Bring the dog." I was about to undo the chain lock when Barnaby went ballistic. He wasn't just growling anymore. He was barking savagely, ramming his body against the glass, snapping his jaws at the man. That gave me pause. I looked back at the ranger, and that's when I noticed the details. The snow was coming down hard, at least 2 inches an hour. But there was no snow on his hat. None. Like he had just materialized there 5 seconds ago. And then I looked at his uniform. It wasn't right. The patch on his arm didn't say National Park Service or Colorado State Parks. It was just a blur of colors that looked like a patch from a distance, but up close, it was just shapes. Meaningless shapes. I'm going to call 911 to confirm, I yelled, my hand gripping the door handle tight. The ranger's smile dropped. Instantly. He didn't get angry. He didn't look frustrated. His face just went blank. Slack. "There is no time," he said. But his voice had changed. It didn't sound like a man anymore. It sounded like a recording of a man being played back at a slightly slower speed, deep and warped. Open the door. I slammed the glass door shut and locked all 3 deadbolts. The man didn't bang on the glass. He didn't try to break in. He just stood there, staring at me with those dead, shark-like eyes. I ran to the kitchen and called the police. The dispatcher told me there were no rangers in the area and definitely no gas leaks reported. She told me to lock myself in an interior room and that a deputy was about 40 minutes away due to the road conditions. I took Barnaby and hid in the pantry, clutching a kitchen knife. About 20 minutes later, while I was huddled on the floor, I heard a voice from right outside the house, near the pantry window. It was my voice. Not a similar voice. My voice. "Hello? Is anyone there? I'm hurt." It was repeating a phrase I had said on the phone to my mom earlier that day, but the intonation was all wrong. It was mimicking me to try and lure me out. I stayed there, crying into the dog's fur, until I saw the red and blue lights of the sheriff's cruiser reflect off the snow outside. When the deputies searched the property, they found footprints on the back deck. But they weren't boot prints. They looked like bare human feet, but elongated. The toes were too long, and the stride length between the steps was nearly 7 feet, leading from the deck straight into the deep tree line. The police said it was probably just a sick prankster messing with a college girl. But I know what I saw. I know that thing wasn't wearing a costume. It was wearing a disguise. And if my dog hadn't stopped me, I would have walked right out into the snow with it.